Now obviously a mop doesn't have quite as many parts and pieces to it as a vacuum does, but we still do want to go over our mop supplies and what makes it different with us. So first and foremost, you'll notice we use O-Cedar mop buckets and O-Cedar mop poles. For the mop bucket and filling it, you'll want to get the hottest water you can from the client household you're at. So a lot of times that's at the kitchen sink or a supply sink if they have one. You'll want to fill your water level about 2/3 full. You'll notice there's a basket towards the top here that spins. You don't want any water collecting in that, but you want your water level pretty much just below it. Along with the hot water, we put 5 sprays of heavy duty spray inside our mop bucket as a normal cleaning solution. You do want to note that some clients may request a different product, so you do want to check your notes frequently for that information. In terms of actually using the supplies, your mop poles will come like this. They have 2 areas that they extend at, and then they will tighten into place. For putting on the mop head, you'll notice that it's pretty much a triangle. You just want to line up your triangle with that on the pole, and it'll snap straight on. That's all the pieces of the mop. Now let's talk about proper techniques and how you want to use it inside the home. Important things to keep in mind when you're using our mop supplies. You want to make sure your full mop head and all the bristles get dunked completely into the mop bucket when you're ready to change the water actually on your mop head. And you'll notice that I'm not just letting it sit there. I'm going to give it a good wiggle in there to really break up any dirt I have on my bristles. And then in my top basket up here, I'm going to again make sure all of my bristles and pieces of my mop head goes into the basket. Otherwise, when I go to kick it around and take that excess water out of it, I'm going to flick water everywhere around me. You'll see on this back end here, there's a little kicker. If I very lightly hold my mop pole, as it rotates, it'll wick out that excess water from my basket area. So you want to give it a good couple pumps. There's not a certain magic number. I usually do about 4 or 5 kicks before I start mopping other floors. A question you may run into a lot is, when do I change the mop water? When do I change the water in the mop bucket? When do I change the water on my mop head? The answer is pretty simple, but it's also not at the same time. Calibration is the key word. So as each home is different, so is its floors. Homes that are more dirty, you're going to have to change your water more frequently. Homes that aren't as dirty, you won't have to change your water as frequently. A good measure to have is that you'll only be able to do a couple rooms with a mop bucket full, normally no more than 1 full level. And in terms of the water on your mop head, you'll never be able to go more than 1 full room before changing the water on here, and a lot of times you'll probably have to change it once or twice per room. When it comes to mopping, you'll want to make sure you set your mop bucket up somewhere that's most helpful for you. Usually at the end of the room that you're working at is what I would recommend. Then similar to vacuuming, you want to think as mopping like coloring. So you're going to start by setting your edges. So with the vacuum, we edged with the wand to set our perimeter. Here you're going to do the same thing with your mop pole. Then, just like coloring, you can start focusing on the interior once you have your edges set. Something you want to keep in mind for mopping is you want to mop with the grain when you're able to. What does that mean? As you're looking through your flooring, if you have lines that you see lining up in a certain direction, either vertically or horizontally, that would be your grain. You want to make sure your final pass through on any hard floors that have a grain is with the grain. This is important because if you go against the grain on real hardwood floors, it will show when it dries and it makes it look streaky. You want to overlap panels when you're able to. That little bit of overlap will help make sure that you mop the full floors. When you finish mopping, you'll want to make sure you dump out your dirty water in the toilet closest to where you'll be exiting the client home from. A lot of times that's a half bath, but that's not always the case. If that's not available to you, we do not just dump the mop water outside in the grass. We need to find a drain in the road or maybe off of the sidewalk instead. Otherwise, you want to make sure that you're taking your mop head and fully spinning and kicking it out so any of that excess water can be put into the mop bucket and isn't stuck on your mop head anymore. So I like to be pretty aggressive at that point and really make sure I kick out any of that excess water. You can then take your mop head off. It pulls right off, just how it kind of snapped on. You will then take your dirty mop head and put it in your team lead's vehicle along with the rest of the dirties. The mop bucket, before you place it back, please just make sure to take a towel and wipe through the bottom of it for that excess water that you had wicked out at the end. Otherwise, that's it for the mop.